The whole of San Antonio were hosts for this fair. It wasn't just the people working there, it was the whole city. And in light of that, obviously we had to be hospitable and invite people into restaurant situations where in the 60s that had not been as open and healthy a climate.
We had segregation, and we felt that HemisFair was not going to be successful unless we had some form of integration in the city. And we had restaurants that were all segregated.
The South at that time had vertical integration. You could walk in, a black could, to get a cup of coffee or eat a sandwich, but he'd have to stand, he couldn't sit.
At our house one night, we had a meeting and said we ought to try to integrate the restaurants on Broadway. And we each took a restaurant.
And we told them the story. Look, you've got to integrate. We're having a World's Fair. We can't bring people in from all over the world and show discrimination against a particular group of people on account of their race. It just won't work. And when the day came, it happened.
During the 60s and in Texas, as I recall, you couldn't buy, there were very stringent alcohol laws about where alcohol could be purchased.
We weren't allowed to have drinks. Remember that. So that had to be solved because we could not be a World's Fair and not serve drinks. That was too provincial.
And if you wanted a drink, you brown bagged it. You put your bottle in a brown bag, surreptitious way you put your liquor in a glass and drank it, which is really out of sync with the rest of the country if you're going to have a fair.
On the HemisFair grounds, Club Abrazo was formed where guests could get mixed drinks. It was now down to the wire for the team charged with getting foreign participation, and Mexico had still not agreed to come aboard. Carlos Freiman finally confronted a Mexican government official who told him it was because we had insulted Mexico.
I was so amazed. I said, why? He says, because you're trying to compete with us with your dates. And I said, please explain yourself, Mr. Minister. He says, well, we are overlapping, and Mexico does not want to have any overlapping with the Olympic Games that will be held in late in 1968. So either you change your dates, or Mexico will not participate. God, I felt so disheartened because we had been working for 3 years.
The dates were changed, and Mexico was a major presence at the fair. One of Carlos Freiman's more memorable trips was to South America with Governor Connolly.
And you know that he was being received almost like a head of state, because in Venezuela they received him with 18 cannon shots, you understand, which is not something that happens every day.
While in Brazil, they received tragic news about a Texas campus shooting.
And I received a call, and they said that somebody had been shooting at the University of Texas, if you remember. And from the tower of the University of Texas, somebody had been shooting.
The number of casualties increased, and Governor Connolly hastened back to Texas. That 1966 tragedy only set the stage for another, as 1968 arrived and San Antonio was preparing for opening day of HemisFair.
1968 was a year right out of hell. It was, there's so many hideous, tragic things that happened that stained our country.
Our nation was in turmoil over the Vietnam War, and Lyndon Baines Johnson announced he would not seek a second term as president. Then, just 2 days before HemisFair was to open, Martin Luther King was assassinated.
It caused a lot of political unrest in the country, and there were tensions, people were worried, and the president, who otherwise I'm sure would have been here, did not feel he should leave Washington at that time.
What do we do now? How do we go on? How do we gather up this angry, scared country and say, we are going on and we will learn from this, but we are not going to let it defeat us. Of course, right away for me, there was the question, shall I go on or not? I wanted to go on because I felt there was nothing I could do of any importance by canceling the trip. And I'm glad I went on because it's it's a glorious memory.
That was always one of the rather strange things about HemisFair, is that here in the midst of this security and the national tragedy, and then we're putting on this cheerful world event. And so it was that mixture that made for a very interesting dynamic.
But there was so much to do and so much to keep going, and so little time that you just kept charging along.
We were on a critical path schedule that had April the 6th of 1968 as our opening date.
The big bulldozer was time, the time clock. You had to get ready to open.
And I just could not probably cover all of the panic meetings we had.
In addition to the increased security necessitated by the assassination of Martin Luther King, there were rumors of other potential crises, a civil rights demonstration, threats to blow up the tower.
I mean, there were so many worrisome moments when we didn't know whether it was actually going to be a fair. And so the opening of the fair was probably the most exciting time for me. It finally made it.
Everything was clean and bright and new, and the sun was just coming up, and it was really impressive to see everything in its pristine condition.
Opening ceremonies were presided over by the president's wife, Lady Bird Johnson.
And my memories are mostly just a montage of bands and flags and banners and speeches and familiar faces. It was a rat-a-tat-tat bombshell of a day, but you could recognize so many great achievements in it.
And I remember very well the day, I mean, I can even remember the bridge I was walking across at the fair the day that it struck me. This is it. I mean, we have opened it. This is the fair.
It was just so exciting. Everybody was just, we'd finally gotten the fair open. We were doing our jobs. It was a perfect day.
Opening day was filled with formal ceremonies. Officials and honorary guests scurried through the day, which culminated with an evening gala at the newly constructed Theater for the Performing Arts.
The Tobin family did the opening opera performance of Don Carlo with the San Antonio Symphony, and all of the singers were from the Met.
I had never seen Don Carlo, and I understand this was the first performance. And Bob Tobin, Robert Tobin, who else, was sort of the official host, at least he greeted me, and he had on that most splendid of costumes for a man, white tie and tails, and he was just the right height to carry it off well. And I had on a flowing yellow chiffon evening dress, one of my favorites, that fell from the shoulders and just floated after me.
The distinguished guests were all invited to this performance, and they were all wearing full evening clothes. And these blades were dressed by the best designers in the world.
I remember that I had a good friend in New York who knew about this opera here, so she sent me a Seal Chapman dress to wear. I still have that dress.
And then there was this one fascinating figure I saw rather out of the corner of my eye, and she had on this rather ethereal gray costume, and she was a very interesting looking woman.
She was the artist Georgia O'Keeffe, who had been helping Alexander Gerard complete his exhibit.
The fact of the matter is I think they went straight from work, because we were working 20-hour days to get ready.
The opera, Don Carlo, was lengthy, but the clever organizers of this gala planned a long intermission for a dinner in the new Civic Center.
We stopped for the most wonderful buffet prepared by Rosemary, where this enormous crowd, which must have been, gosh, in the thousands, was somehow fed gracefully and elegantly